ni kan? Mana tu? Mana tu?
Sekarang belum buat facilities.
Dah tahu bukan? Bukan nak? Mana dia punya ni?
Dekat channel
Untuk nak dua. Kan? Ni tempat ni kan?
tolong sikit. Budak Vietnam dia tak bawa gambar pasport, gambar buat ID kat satu, buat kat puteri satu.
Suruh buat lah.
Nak ijaz buat kan, buat ID kat satu. So macam tak nak, so ni takkan ambil gambar je. So soft copy tu sign up pergi kat kedai printing. Kalau dia boleh buat.
Putih lah. Sedikit je. Putih ke? So tak lebih ke sana? Betul.
Dia kata apa sekarang tu commerce kan. Kan. Kadang-kadang apa sih? Kan. Membership mereka.
Cuba banyak. Panjang tu tengok.
Lagi awak akan pilih jalur. Boleh? Yo. Ya. Set appointment for 12. Dekat office sana.
Baik, kalau dah boleh suruh pergi kedai ya.
Ada kelas kan? Ada kelas sampai pukul 11. Jadi
baik tu pergi
pukul 11. Dia habis lah pukul 11. So saya nak siapkan ketua mungkin lah buat sambut.
Pasal Olivia punya Facebook ni. Tak ada lagi. Pegang.
Boleh apa? Boleh? Nak buat kat mana tu nak? Office ham. Kau tak boleh.
Kau ada dua.
Correct. Pump bilang saya kepala tinggi. Baik.
Jadi, yang ini very simple. So, for this, gamer, gamer. Nah, waktu stop podcast, ada apa? Hah?
Kuih. 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 Kuih dalam English apa?
Huh? In English, kuih is like a delicacy.
Ya.
Uh,
In bahasa Malaysia,
in Malaysia, delicacy.
Kuih.
In Malay, called kuih.
duduk sibuk belajar bahasa Malaysia.
Yeah.
Kuih.
You are recorded. You are not recorded.
It's okay. I'm perfectly all right. It's just that I've also tried out so many things. But it's okay. Before, you still have one more week, right? One more week. No, you have longer time. Tuesday. Next Tuesday. Okay, we'll try to meet and sort out your courses and everything. After that, okay, you can go and do your work there. Yeah. Maybe cannot. Yeah, right. Let's see. This Friday. This Friday. This Friday. We are finishing or not yet? Yeah, we finished tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, tomorrow is the last day. Okay. So this Friday you take the second. It's not Monday, but we try to do or Thursday, yeah, yeah.
Hello, good morning, everyone. In the name of God, Passion the Merciful, and another day of our colloquium. So far, we had 2 amazing days with you guys, and today we are going to have a very special day. And this is my honor, an honor for me to inform you we are having a very special guest, Mr. Eliram. He is here with us, and he's one of our honored industry speaker, and having 3 decades of experience in supply chain planning, purchasing, logistics, exposure, and experience, I think he has many things to share with us today. And he is also a director of global logistics at Sun Edison Semiconductor LLC, and he accepted our invitation, and we are pleased to have him here today. He also has a company. Welcome in MUSD, and thank you for your coming. I would like to invite him to give us a talk, and definitely we are going to enjoy it. Please put your hand together and welcome Mr. Eliram.
Thank you, Dr. Reza. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So the topic that I'm going to talk about today is on strategy and modeling. But before I start, I would like to give all of you some work so that you do the work first and then I do the work later. So Natalie, my colleague, she's just passing out small pieces of paper. And once all of you have it, I'm going to give you like 2 or 3 minutes to write down an answer to one very simple question. Okay? No names. You can write it using a left hand if you want to. So you don't want it to be ambiguous, right? So, but just write it all down. Right? The first thought that comes to your mind as a response to the question, okay? And then we'll collect it back just as information on how different people perceive different events, how different people look at the same thing. And how much of similarity and dissimilarity there's been. Okay? I'm basically computer illiterate, so I need somebody to help me project this on the screen. As I said, the topic is going to be strategy and modeling, and I put it there as yesterday's ideas for tomorrow. And the reason is, whatever I'm going to be sharing is real life practices, real life experiences that we've had in the company that I've worked for, which all happened yesterday. some of this you can use in your experiences for tomorrow. So that's the whole idea of yesterday's ideas for tomorrow. So we're going to have, there's just a sequence of what we're going to go through. This is the introduction question that I talked to you about, and then we talk about PD, talk about strategy, have a short bio break, and then we come back on modeling and look at the world map and decide what we're going to do next. Okay. The question is, why are you attending this session today? A very simple question. Don't take too much time to think about it. The first thought that comes to your mind, just write it down. Why are you attending this session today? You decided to give up 2 hours of your life to sit here and listen to a complete stranger sharing stories about what he has done in his company, which is totally unrelated to you. Why are you attending this session today? So if you just give yourself like 2 minutes to write that down. You don't have to think too deeply. It can be a 1-word answer, it can be a 10-word sentence. Then you don't mind just collecting it back. Or Natalie is my colleague, and she's actually a handwriting expert analysis. So she's going to look at all your handwriting and figure out what kind of characteristics each one of you has later on. Okay, pretty much everybody has completed. Thank you very much for your feedback, which we will review later on in the second half of the session. So before I start, let me give you a background of the company that I work for. It's called Sun Edison Semiconductor LLC. It is a US-based company which started off sometime in the late 50s in the US, and they were producing silicon wafers, specifically meant for the semiconductor industry. So these wafers are supplied to the chip manufacturers, anyone from Intel to IBM to Motorola, Toshiba, all these guys. So these wafers look just like a CD, a compact disc that you have, but there's no hole in the center. It is almost circular except for a flat base. It is as thin as your hand. And it is perfect. It is very, very brittle. So the handling of it is very, very crucial. The biggest defect we have is always handling damages in the factory line. So we've been doing this from the late 50s, and Malaysia was the first offshore plant for this company. So we set it up in the Sungai Way Free Trade Zone, where we have been since 1972. So that makes us one of the older doing companies in KL. About the same time that Penang FIZ started. So we produce millions, we produce at least about 25 million wafers of differing sizes. We have factories in Malaysia. We have one in KL, one in Ipoh. We have a factory in Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Italy, and in the US. So we are pretty fairly covered as far as global representation and footprint is concerned. the different sizes denote the different technologies that the end users use. So we have a wafer as small as 4 inches. We started off with a 2-inch wafer, which is really so small, 2-inch diameter wafer. Right now, the biggest wafer we have is 12 inches. And we are working on the next generation, which is even much bigger. We work in tandem with the OEM guys like Samsung and Intel. So when they migrate to a fab that can handle a wafer that's as big as 12 inches, then we start producing it. Right? You can't produce a wafer that's too big unless your OEM has got the equipment to be able to handle it. So we did all these semiconductor wafers. About 5 years ago, we acquired a solar company in the US called SunVista. And solar companies, solar is pretty new, it's probably around for the last 15, 20 years, but it's only within the last 7 years or so that it's really picked up. And a solar farm is one where you have wafers that are made, which are made into a module, which is as big as 2 of your tables put together. And then you fix this either on the rooftop or on land, on real estate. It basically uses photovoltaic technology, absorbs the energy, converts it, now you have electricity. And typically, most of this have been through the government projects. Government tenders started off in Europe, then in Asia, US is very, very big on this, especially companies, private companies like Walmart who have got a huge rooftop. They plant all of this. Different countries have different incentives for this. In Malaysia, we have, if you will take a drive to KLIA, just before you reach KLIA on the left, you will see a small solar farm, which is put up by our company. You also see those solar panels on the rooftop of KLIA, which we have done. So we did about 20 megawatts of projects within Malaysia. We have done almost 2 gigawatts of projects around the world over the last 7 years. The way that the solar industry works is by projects. So I could have a project in the middle of Venezuela, and if I win the tender, that's where my project site is. If I win a project tender for KLIA Airport, that's where the project site is. So I've got suppliers all over the world for the different components, and then everything comes into the project site to get installed. Okay. So just to give you a background of it, okay, DD is a simple strategy matrix for what you do a strategy. Okay? But I'm not going to talk about DD because this is purely academic. Right? And you could learn this from any textbook now, and I'm sure most of you are already familiar with all this strategy. What I want to talk about is what is strategy from a work perspective. So if you are sitting in a company and you are looking at logistics and you're asking yourself, what's my strategy? What do I want to do? It's very different from a business strategy that you have. So very specifically for logistics, what's the strategy? So when I came in into this role in this company, like I said, we had factories around the world. And the concept when we started all these offshore plants was full autonomy. So every factory decided on their own logistics. So the guys in Malaysia were using forwarder 1, forwarder 2, forwarder 3. One in Ipoh was using someone else, in Taiwan, Korea. Everybody was using their own forwarders. And it worked very well for all of them. Because this American concept of P&L, trying to associate a P&L to each operation, they were looking at it from purely a point of, I want to have the best rates, even if I have to use 10 different forwarders to move my product. So each one of them had their own forwarders, and when I looked at the entire map, there were 35 different forwarders that we were using around the world to move things from point A to point B, whether it was raw materials, or finished goods, or intermediate material, or even material that had to move between one factory to another as part of the manufacturing process step. So the first thing we did was we need to consolidate all of this. Right? It just doesn't make sense to have 35 lanes. So then we looked at all the lanes and said, how do we consolidate all of this? Now, we've got so many factories, so many forwarders, each one is doing it differently. We were shipping things by air, we were shipping it by sea, we were shipping it by truck, we were shipping it by rail. So when we did a count of how many lanes we had, each lane is a point A to point B, we had almost 500 over lanes. So we said, okay, we got 500 lanes with 35 different forwarders spread in different parts of the world. How do we even go out and consolidate this and narrow this down? What do we need to do? So the first thing we did was identify who are the forwarders that we would like to have. Okay. So there's so many in the world. There are big players, small players, medium-sized players. So in trying to figure out who we wanted, not in terms of who we're going to award it to, but who are the eligible ones that we want to call. So we said we'll call number 1, number 3, number 7, number 9. These are the 4 guys that we're going to call. And then we had to rationalize why. Why are we choosing this 4 instead of somebody else? Right? And what we did was we eliminated all those big players. Big players means players like DHL, who were too big. They were running at $20 billion worth of revenue. When you deal with someone who is so big, and we were not too big at that time, when you deal with somebody who's too big, you don't have the muscle to be able to demand what you want. So we said we're going to look only at those forwarders who are medium-sized. If they are medium-sized, they want to grow. If they want to grow, they would be more willing to do what we ask them to do. So we narrowed it down to this 4 or 5 players who were all around a 3 to 5 billion revenue companies. And the next thing we said was, hey, I have got factories all over the world and I ship all over the world. Now, I want to make sure that these 4 or 5 guys have got footprint in all of the places where I have lanes. I don't want agents to deal with them. I don't want third-party arrangements. I want a single guy who handles it door to door. So that was the second qualification. Third qualification was we were looking at FCPA, saying we want a company who's very strict on FCPA, which is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Right? So you don't want someone who bends the rules, you don't want somebody who is non-compliant, you don't want somebody who tries to do any kind of business under the table. So that you don't have compliance issues since you're making so many shipments all over the place. That was the third criteria. Fourth criteria was how flexible are these guys doing? Flexibility is very key in logistics because you don't have fixed lanes, you don't have fixed schedules, everything is a consequence. If manufacturing doesn't produce, you don't ship. If the customer decides to push out, you don't ship. Customer asks for something urgent, you got to ship it early. There's so many different variables that comes into play. So we said, how flexible are these guys? And flexibility is not something that you can measure objectively, it becomes a subjective arrangement. So when we had initial first round talks with the forwarders that we had identified, said, okay, these guys seem flexible, this guy doesn't seem flexible, whatever. Then we went to the last criteria, which was, which of these guys would we want to partner with from a long-term perspective? We're going to go through a major global exercise. This doesn't make sense that I'm going to change or do this every year or every other year. We want to be able to have somebody for a long term, almost like a marriage. Okay? But so therefore, you're going to be so sure. It's just like how you think so many times before you propose and get married to someone. So you went through a brainstorming to say, why do we want to get hitched to this partnership? What is it that makes these guys do? Yeah. And we finally came up with 5 companies, 5 global companies. Right? Then you look at going out for an RFP, an RFQ. Right? So if you want to put out a tender, typically a tender is very, very specific. I want you to do this, this, and this. Here I've got 500 lanes. How in the world am I going to come out with an RFQ package to put in 500 lanes where I only have estimated volumes? I can only look back at history. I cannot predict what lane is going to move in the future, what volumes are going to move in the future. So then we said, okay, just like how we took the global 50 forwarders and brought it down to 5, we said, let's look at this 500 lanes and bring it down to a manageable number that makes sense. So then we looked at, okay, what are those lanes that are almost fixed? Because even though there's so much of variability, raw material is a fixed lane. Every factory needs to have this raw material. So that's a big thing. Then we started looking at fixed lanes. Next is high dollar spend lanes, 80-20 rule. Right? So we whittled that down as well to say, historically, how much have we been spending on some of these high dollar lanes? Through doing these 2 steps, we whittled it down from 500 lanes to 50 lanes. So now we got 50. So 50 lanes that make up 80% of our spend out of the 500 lanes that we have. So now I could put together a simple RFQ to say, what is it, what are your rates for this 50 lanes? And then we send this out to the forwarders, 5 forwarders. We all get back. Now you've got the next big headache. How do I analyze and compare? I got 50 lanes from 5, so there's 250 numbers. You've got to go lane by lane to start doing it. So what we did was, within that 50 lanes, we reprioritized on another 80-20 to say, within this 50, where's my 80%? And that came out to like 10 lanes. That was my top 10 lanes. So now I've got an easier way of being able to do a comparison of 10 lanes with 5 different forwards. We did that. And we narrowed it down through a process of elimination. We came down to 2 forwarders. So we had these 2 forwarders. So the last step in that entire process was to meet the CEOs of those 2 companies. And the only reason we were able to meet them is because, one, they were not giants. They were mid-sized guys who were eager for business. And here is a client who is coming out and basically giving to you on a silver platter to say, I'm going to give you my global business as a partnership. So the CEO matters. And the CEO, if you talk to the CEO of a company long enough, you would know whether that company is worth being a partner. You would be able to see what their vision is, what their principles are, what they value, and how they react to it. So we went out and did this meeting with the CEO, nothing about the business, nothing about the rates. Okay? We just said, we've shortlisted you, we want to have a chat with you. So my boss in the US and I went down, sat down with the CEO and just talked. We just talked shop. We talked about his company, we talked about our company, we talked about our vision and our future, and he talked about his vision and his future. And finally, we came out from the 2. It was pretty close, but one had a slight edge over the other. So we decided to award our entire global business to one forward, 100%, and they had never moved a single lane for us anywhere in the world. So to them, this was greenfield revenue that just came. It was worth, at that time, it was worth about $30 million, US dollars. Not very big, but if you were a company and someone comes to you and gives you $30 million, out of the blue, that's big. So now that they've got this business, the next big headache was, how do I implement this? I got every site has been doing things differently, and logistics is not something that sleeps or takes a break. You're moving stuff every day, right? Somewhere in the world, along some way. How do I stop, and how do I bring these new guys on board? So then we hit upon an approach. We said, I want to have a transition and implementation team at every site. This guy said, okay, we'll put up a team. We'll have a 5-person team at every location, at every factory. And we didn't want to rush into this, so we said, we'll do this within a space of 1 quarter. So within 3 months, I want to turn on every site. So at the end of 3 months, my entire 500 lanes are on wheels. Okay? So we had that, we did that, started with one site, okay? Went through all the lanes, the processes, the SOPs, and everything else. Okay? Basically had those guys camping at our locations. To understand what are you moving, how are you moving, what's the urgency, what's the sensitivity, everything. It took us 3 months to do. Got all of these guys in. Then we said, okay, and this is where some of it comes as part of your strategy. You don't tell them exactly what you want, okay, or what you're going to ask them for until the time is right. So they had all this transition and implementation team at all our sites in all the different locations, and obviously they had local people, so they had their Japanese guys working in our Japanese factory to make sure that the transition and implementation worked. And their main role was to understand the business, understand the material, the cargo that's being moved. So once we got this implemented, we said, you know what? Over the last 3 months, your T&I, transition and implementation team, has been working at our factory, understanding all this stuff. They just know it so much. So you know what? I think they should work for us. They should work for us, but you should pay for them. So now you have these guys sitting there. We've got a $30 million revenue that's just been given to us on a silver platter. We spent 3 months putting together this team to understand what needs to happen. And now he's saying, let them work for you as implants. So these are your implants, you pay for them, they work for you. They were at a point where they could not put their leg forward or backward. They were stuck. And I had a very smiley face then. They had no choice. So they said yes. So I got free headcount at every location, paid for by the forwarder, doing work for me, under the guise that your guys have already built all this knowledge and wealth. Right? They need to be with us. So I got free headcount all over the world, all over the sites, right? So I got about 10 of them. But getting a headcount, what it does is, typically in the industry, when you have a lot of business that you're giving them, you say, give me a headcount. You put them in. And what do? They do logistics work. Okay? They do documentation work, they do booking, they do all that nitty-gritty stuff that allows shipment to move from point A to point B. That's what they do. I said, not necessary. You give me the person, and I will decide what work they're going to do. They may do logistics work, they may do procurement work, they may do receiving work, they may do any kind of work that I ask them to do. But you're going to pay for them. They say yes. Again, this goes back to how flexible are you, the criteria that we had and the discussions that told us before. So now I got people who don't necessarily have to do logistics work, but they were basically headcount that I could use anywhere in my factory for whatever purpose. Free. So then we got all these guys in, and everything went on smooth, no issues, right? So now you get a consolidated global report because they move all your news. You know what you're spending, you know what the modes you're using, you know how many lanes are active, how many are inactive. You've got very specific rates. You can do forecasting of spend. You get all these advantages because you have one forwarder who's handling 500 lanes around the world. And when it came to reports, they had a very good, all forwarders have very good systems, right, to generate the kind of reports. Forwarders will have standard reports. Need not be what you want. Every business is different. So we actually sat down with them to customize and say, this is what I want to see. These are the data elements I want to see. This is the frequency that I want you to publish this reports. This is the kind of information we want. All the information is good there. It's just a matter of customizing the output to give us what makes sense for us, not for them. So if I want to see how much did I spend on truck versus rail, show me a graph. How many shipments did I move from point A to point B and the frequency in which I moved? Because now I can go tip my procurement guys to say, why are you buying every week and spending this amount of money? Why not you do it like a purchase? What's the right quantity to buy so that instead of having 24 shipments a year from the same point A to point B, can I make it 12? Can I make it 20? And what is the savings if I do that? So we came up with a whole list of reports looking at what we wanted to achieve. Because I want to reduce procurement spend. That was the topic. Okay. So if I want to do that, what kind of information do I need? Then you start writing down that information. Then you say, this is what the report needs to be. So we started off with the end of how we're going to use reports, and then we came up with the request for them for those reports. Instead of receiving 50 reports and throwing away 45 because you hardly ever look at it, now we got reports that we actually used. So we did that. Then this went on for a couple of years. Very good, no issue. That was the first strategy. Your strategies don't end. Whatever strategy you come out with, it's not a business strategy. This is the operational strategy. So the first end state of the strategy was consolidate 35 forwarders into one. So now I've got one forwarder. I've run this for 3 years. What do I do next? The strategy didn't stop there. I don't want to be put at the mercy of a single forwarder. What if he collapses? What if he refuses to be as flexible as he was 3 years ago? What if they decide to pull back this headcount? What if they become a bit more strict in terms of how they behave with us? What if they don't want to reduce rates? So I don't want them to be complacent. Even if they were not complacent, I don't want to give them an opportunity to be complacent. So what I did was find fault. I found fault in Japan. So when you move shipments, okay, if you move one box per day, it will be safe. If you move 1,000 boxes every day of the year, you're bound to have damages. Okay? That's the reality of life. You will have damages, you'll have knocks, you'll have handling, mishandling, whatever that happens along the way, right? Not sure how many of you are familiar with, but this is just a trick question. If I am air shipping something from point A to point B, which is an export, can you guess how many times the shipment is touched? Can you guess how many times it's touched before the final customer gets it? Just give a number, pick a number. 10. 2. No penalties for wrong guesses. Just pick a number. Anyone else?
8.
Sorry? 8. It can vary, but the average for our factory was 11. Excellent. But it's 10. We had 11 touch points from the time your product is ready at your factory dock to when it finally gets delivered to your customer's factory dock. 11 times. It is touched by different people. It's touched by your people when they load it into the truck. It's touched by the truck driver when he unloads it at the warehouse. It's touched again when they move it to the airline. It's touched by the cargo terminal handlers. It's touched when it goes into the plane. It gets touched when it comes out of the plane, into the terminal, into a truck, and finally gets unloaded at a customer store. Average is 11. How many times does a sea shipment get touched? Any guesses? For sea shipment alone. He actually got the answer right because he actually gave the answer for the second question. It's 2. Because you load it into a container at your dock, and the container gets opened at the customer's dock. Right? So you have 11 touch points, and we were shipping 80% of our product by air. So we had a lot of damages. Right? So we went to Japan and we saw all these damages, and we said, it's not acceptable. Not acceptable at all. Okay? You make one more damage, and you guys are out. And I knew they were going to make one more damage. I already lined up the competitor. Okay. I was already thinking of how to make this change, and all I needed was an excuse. You don't have to be absolutely honest in business. If you are, you will never be a businessman. Okay. So they made the mistake. There was one more damage. It was like, okay, good. I'm sorry, I told you, right? So I brought in one of their friendly competitors. And I said, you have my entire Japan site. Sorry, not the entire, I took the lane, one lane, which contributed to 50% of the total spend. It was a very heavy lane. So my original forwarder was doing, I don't know, 35 lanes, which earned 50% of the revenue, and the competitor did one lane with 50% of the revenue. So that was a very big hit for them. Okay. 1 year. I did that for 1 year, and they really suffered. Right? What was the message? The message was Taiwan is now safe, Korea is safe, Malaysia is safe, Italy is safe, because they know that if they repeat this level of poor quality, lanes are going to be taken away. Now when you sit down at the table and talk about, let's talk about rates, they're a little bit more giving. Let's talk about service, they are more giving. Why? Because you have penalized them in one place. Right? So we did that for 1 year, we took it away, part of the strategy. I want you to feel that this is not yours for life. Yes, I want to be a partner, but this is just like a marriage, right? Every time you have a quarrel, you do something to reinforce the reason why you're together. Same way, he said, this is what will happen if we don't get what we want. After a year, I gave it back to them. You know why? And I found that strategy, the same strategy worked. I told this new guy, look, you make one more mistake, I'm taking it back from you. They made a mistake. 50% of the revenue, so you can imagine the number of shipments and the volume that was involved. 50% of the revenue was worth about $2 million. Huge. Okay. So the number of shipments were immense. So naturally there will be damages that happens. So after a year, I went back to my original guy and said, would you like to take back that lane? He said, yes. Would you like to give me a discounted rate? Yes. So when I had the original rate, so I think it was $1, just for illustration, it was $1 for ad rate. So when I switched it over to this other guy, I got it at 90 cents. When I gave it back to this original guy, dropped it to 80 cents. So very, very silently, without being obvious, you get a rate reduction in the way you enforce the strategy. So you don't go out thinking, I want to reduce my rate. You think, what can I do here that will cause a consequence here where I can benefit? And I win both. I win and I win. Okay. Now what does my original forwarder think? It's okay, I'm giving a little bit discount, but hey, I'm getting back $2 million, almost $2 million worth of link. Okay, 1. 2, I saved my case. I lost the lane, I got it back. Okay. So to them, it's a win. And what did I give? 10 cents. No big deal. I can find the 10 cents somewhere else. So they're happy, you're happy. That's when the strategy will work. If you want to have a strategy that benefits you only and not your service provider, it won't work for long. They will walk away. They will walk away after some time. So you either actually make them benefit or you make them think that they have benefit. As long as that happens, they will continue to be your partner. Okay? A couple of examples. So this is what I spoke about. The chess game plan. You play chess, you're always thinking 10 steps ahead. So when we started off, we said, my first stage is consolidation. My second stage is to introduce the competitor into the equation so that there's no complacency. Okay. My third stage would be to give them the bait. Okay. I want to give them a bait. I want to tell them, pull them in, tell them all the nice things that they want to hear, do it, okay, and then make a twist. Put in a TNI team. That'll make your life easier, the transition and implementation team. Put them in at every site. Makes it easier. Yes. You guys will know exactly what we're doing. Yes. I'll let you walk around my whole factory and you will know my product. You will see it. You will touch it. You will know exactly what I did. Yes. Which customer will ever give that kind of a proposal to you? No one. Great. Bring in the team. Once they're in, it's like, since they're so good, leave them here. They're stuck. Right? Air traffic controller is, this, you might have seen it in the movies and all that, right? So you got this guy sitting in front of this big screen and you've got 500 planes coming in, going out, doing all this stuff. And it's like, man, this is like traffic lights, right? Traffic lights I can see, right? You stop your car and all this, everybody stops and only one lane goes. How do you manage this in the air? All of this crew do that. Logistics, the real life logistics work is almost like an air traffic control, okay? Because you have got movements every day from different point A's to different point B's. You will have issues, you have missed flights, you have offloads, you have damages, you have urgencies. And sometimes the truck that's supposed to come and pick up your goods has a breakdown. What do you do? So every day you're dealing with very, very different kinds of issues. You cannot predict what exactly is going to happen. For the most part, it's fine. But this is the reverse of the 80-20 rule. The 20% of the issues will take up 80% of your time. So you're trying to arrange a shipment, expedite a shipment, a customer is having lines down, all kinds of stuff is happening, right? That takes up a lot of your time. Now, while you are doing this strategy and making this global change, your air traffic controller work doesn't stop. That's continuing as well. So from a 10,000-foot level, you're making a global change with your formats. You're putting in the strategies, you're running this stuff, but every day you're moving stuff, either with the present guy or with the new guy. You're still doing that. You're still being responsible for cost. You're still being responsible for on-time delivery. You're still being responsible for on-time pickup. You still have your responsibilities and you manage this global change. And then you look at an end future game. Where do I want to be? And there's no end. This is an end future game that keeps on changing. They keep on moving the goalposts. So if you spend $30 million in year one, what are you going to spend in year two? What are you going to spend in year three? If I'm going to spend the same 30 million every year, there's no value. You're not doing anything different at all. So regardless of inflation, regardless of anything else that's external to you, fuel surcharge that goes up, comes down, whatever, immaterial. I want to see savings. So this end future game is phase one. Then you get into phase two. And you keep on shifting the goalposts and say, what's my next strategy? What's my next strategy? And you keep on pushing the limits to the point where ultimately your logistics freight spend, your target is zero. I don't want to spend a single cent. Do you think it's possible? Not to spend any money on freight at all. Possible? No. Sorry?
Shipping to China, maybe I think.
Theoretically, it's possible. Practically, you can get closer to zero, but you'll never achieve zero. It doesn't mean that your service providers are doing it for free. It's just that instead of you paying, somebody else is paying for it. So if you don't want to show that you are spending money on freight, it means somebody else has to show that they are spending money on freight. That's all it is. Right? So you have different ways of being able to show how your $30 million spend reduces year by year. Okay? And that's another strategy that you play on. So this is what I covered on consolidation and plan B, bringing it to one forwarder and then having a plan B for anything and everything. Okay? Because things are very dynamic and change. So by the time we put together a strategy to consolidate and the actual time when we implemented this, it took us almost 6 months. And in 6 months, things change. Okay. So South Africa, okay, this is another real life example that we did. So we had this huge solar farm in South Africa. It was almost 500 megawatts. And it involved something like 2,000 containers to be shipped from different parts of the world to Johannesburg and to be trucked from Johannesburg 300 kilometers inland to where the project site was. So can you imagine 2,000 containers, 40-foot containers going in from different sources, going into the port, and then being trucked inland. Right? Some of those places are just so far out that it's unimaginable. Big dollars. We almost had more than $5 million of projected spend for this. So we sent out an RFQ to 4 different forwarders, and we got them to come to South Africa. We said, we'll be there. We want to talk to you in South Africa, in our office. Okay? And I want you to rationalize what your RFQ is, what your proposal is. So this was like a 4-day session. So day one, they're all there one by one, present, this is what they're offering. So by day 2, they're all done. Day 3, we're sitting down to look at what are we going to do? Who are we going to offer? How are we going to make this offering? It's $5 million, it's a one-time deal. In over 3 months, you're done. Right? You bring in all the containers, you deliver it to the site, you're done. You get your $5 million. Right? It's just very good money for them, whoever gets it. So we were sitting there, all of us, Natalie and I, reviewing the data package. So what do we do? And we said, we're going to split this. We're going to split it to 2 guys. Why? Because South Africa is virgin territory. Anything can go wrong. Okay? The project site, you have to pass through multiple villages. And a lot of the people who work at the construction area are from these villages. And those guys can be very, very rowdy. There was an incident where they had a strike. They had a strike because of some silly reason, and they just stopped work. Right? So all kinds of things can happen. So we said, let's give 2 guys. Let's split it and give it to 2 different forwarders. Why? Because in case one has a problem, the other can step in. In case one tries to be funny, the other one can step in. They balance off each other. It's too big a project to be given to one single individual. So we gave it to 2 different guys. Worked very well. Worked very, very well. We made both of them work together with the understanding, and their rates were very similar, very, very similar, very close. So although we went out thinking, who are we going to award it to, we changed our strategy after looking at the data, hearing what our local guys said about what can go wrong in South Africa. So we found insurance, lending. Let's give it to 2 different guys. Work it out. India. India is a very, very complicated country. It is absolutely crazy. Anyone who is familiar with lean, productivity, speed, please don't go to India. You'll faint. In Malaysia, if I want to export something, I have 2 sheets of paper to export. All I need is 2 sheets of paper, give it to customs, and I'm done. In India, you need 2 reams of paper. I had a guy who had a briefcase full of documents in triplicate, And all he did was he went to a place called Ahmedabad in North India to hand over these documents, which would find its way into some unheard of locker room where they just shove it there. They are so fond of paper. Okay? They're so fond of paper, they're so fond of asking you irrelevant questions. Okay? They are paranoid. And it was only years later that I had an appreciation for why they were paranoid. And their paranoia is based on two things. Number one, terrorism. And number two, cheaters. There's too many people who cheat. So in order to try and curb the cheating, they make it so difficult for you to ship a product, import a product, ask for duties, exemption, this, that, everything else. That's the reason why they do this. So I appreciated that later on. So even though you are trying to be very compliant to everything, you still have to follow these 2 reams of paper nonsense when you do it there. So we did an RFQ in India, and we called a bunch of global forwarders and we called a bunch of local forwarders. Global forwarders have to partner up with the local player in order to be able to move your stuff. And I tell you, it was a real mess. Trying to get feedback from 10 different bidders on this. Each one has their own understanding. Each one comes back with something different. You cannot give a tender and expect to get it back and make a decision. You need to go through multiple rounds. So depending on the country where you are operating in, the way that you would conduct an RFQ is going to be absolutely different. Japan is a classic example. Okay? Whatever you tell them, it's any Japanese here, by the way? No. Good, then I can tell the story. Right? When you talk to the Japanese, anything you tell them is hi. So you walk away thinking, great. And all that hi meant was, I hear you. It doesn't mean I agree with you. It doesn't mean I acknowledge. It doesn't mean that I consent. It just means I'm not deaf. I hear you. Hi. That's it. So we had this first couple of rounds with the Japanese guys, and they were like, hi. I'm like, all right. Got everything done in the first meeting, right? Then you send a follow-on email, and the guy says, I will get back to you. So some of these nuances that you see in different countries, when you actually operate there, or when you discuss with these people, when you talk to these people, you have to be clear about what it means. It doesn't mean the same in India versus, in India, this means yes. Okay? This means yes. Everywhere else in the world, it means no. In India, it means yes. So, I had my boss was an American guy, and you go to India, and he's like, yeah, they said no to everything. I said, no, they said yes. Just like the high for Japanese. You got a yes and no mix up for the Indian guys. So understand the nuances. If you have your local players there, very important that you understand from them what are their nuances, what are their idiosyncrasies that you have. There are very few countries where you can have a straight conversation and you're both on the same wavelength and frequency to understand. PTP, Port of Tanjung Pelepas. Okay. We had a huge, we had Flextronics, which was our subcontractor, they were producing 8 to 10 containers per day of product that was then being shipped. Huge. Every week there's a shipment. Okay. So 8 containers a day times 7 is 56 containers a week that were being shipped to different parts of the world. Okay. For our projects for the solar business. Huge. The amount of revenue is significant. So I had my single forwarder who was there. So that forwarder was there. And that forwarder was running this business. Easy, right? Every week with this 56, you ship it to Canada, ship it to Chile, anywhere in the world where we have projects. Too much of easy money. I need to put some pressure. So I went to the second forward. And it so happened that Natalie was working in that second forward at that time. So I brought her into the equation and I played both of them against each other. So this is my project. This is 300 containers. Okay. And you're going to ship this. What's your rate? What's your rate? Who's going to do what? Okay. So some of it, she got it. Some of it, the other forwarder got it. Okay. So that was a different play around. They both knew. They knew that there's only one competition. I made it very clear. You know who your competitor is. If you want to fight, you can fight on grades. Everything else is so simple and straightforward. Yeah. So they will squeeze each other, and they knew what the competitor, what the other person was going to submit. This person submits, they do that. End of the day, they would not submit a rate where they would make a loss. So they're making a profit. And I'm happy because I got two guys playing with each other and I'm getting the better rate out of both. That's how I dealt with PDP. I did that for 2 years. And after 2 years, I hired Natalie. I said, fine, because she's a great asset to have. That's why she's not a forward anymore. Any questions so far on what I've covered? Yes, sir.
When you change one of your forwards, it's a sort of disruptive process. Does it cause cost?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
When you change a forward,
Uh-huh.
is this not related to cost and lots of efforts on your side? Or is this something you can do like this?
Good question. It's very, very painful. It's very painful when you switch a forwarder. Okay? Now, if you have one lane and that's all that you're doing to switch, peanuts. Okay? Not a major issue because you only have one lane that you're shipping. And if you have 500 lanes globally, or even if it's 100 lanes that you are trying to do, it's very painful because nobody in the organization will ever accept an excuse that there was a delay, there was an issue because I changed forwards. Okay? Things have to be seamless. The organization doesn't care who you use. It has to be seamless. If there's one hiccup, you're responsible. So your biggest challenge is how do I make it seamless when I have different people, different companies with different systems, with different processes? How do I make this seamless? Okay. The very first issue I have is, who are these guys? How do I let my factory guys know who they have to deal with? They're so used to dealing with this group of people who have been their forwarders and the support structure for the last 5 years, and now suddenly I'm bringing in this group of people. How do I connect with these guys? I don't even know how they look like. So it's a real painful thing. And that's the reason why when we did this consolidation, we said we want a partnership. We don't want to change every 2 years. There is a major cost involved. Right? The cost is learning, cost, time. During that time, your efficiency drops, your productivity drops, okay? And you make a lot of mistakes. Okay? And then you have this big time reconciliation issue. What was it before? What is it now? So when you want to do a huge consolidation like this, you want to say, I want to do this for 5 years at least, and I don't want to change. It's like buying a car. And says, I don't want to buy a car and change it every year. I want to keep it for 10 years and then sell it off or whatever. So did this, we did this exercise towards the end of 2009. We haven't changed the formulas yet. Okay, we're still keeping the same guys from 2009. Right? And it's not that we don't want to change. I don't have a good enough reason to want to kick them out. I mean, what's the real difference when you name all the forwarders? Every time a forwarder comes to me, when I have discussions, they come by and say, we can do this. I say, tell me what you can do that the others can't. And there's nothing they can tell you. There's nothing. Every forwarder is great. They know what it takes to move things from A. So what's the difference? How do they differentiate themselves? Can you guess how they differentiate? System? Your system is good, mine is good. Your service is good, mine is good. Sorry. Rates is one. But if you give me low rates and give me screwed up service, you're gone, right?
Speed.
You know what really makes the difference? You talk about DB Schenker, DHL, UPS, FedEx. You talk about any of these names, right? Who are you dealing with? The people. The account manager or the person who's responsible for your account, that's the one who sits in front of you. That's the face of FedEx. So if that person is screwed up, in your mind, FedEx is screwed up. It's as simple as that, right? Because I'm not talking to the CEO of FedEx to move my shipment. It's this individual who comes to visit me, sit down, and if this person is smart, we get aligned, we are calibrated, knows exactly what I want, delivers, blah, blah, blah. That company is great. That's all that makes the difference, nothing else. Because even if your rates were lower and I've given it to her, I can tell her, I need you to reduce 10 cents. And you'll come back to me and tell me what you can do. So the person makes the difference, totally. Because that's what you deal with day to day. You don't care about the company. That's why we went for a mid-sized company. The large guys, $20 million revenue, they don't care about you. What's your business? 30 million? I make 20 billion a year. You want to give me business? Give me. Don't want to give me? Fine. We'll find something else. But for a small guy, $30 million is a lot of money. Makes a big difference to the people. They're hungry. Okay? If they are hungry, they will do what you want them to do. If they are not hungry, they will do what they want to do. That's the difference. Any other questions before we get into order? I hope that gave you some idea about what strategy is. I was just trying to share some of the real life examples of strategy that we executed in my company. Okay. Next we go to modeling. What is modeling? Okay. This is modeling. We use a lot of them in our company. First question to ask is, why do you want to model? The modeling is putting together a hypothesis that translates to an outcome. You're trying to make it as much data as possible. Why do you even want to model something? The whole idea behind modeling is to change an abstract concept into something that is physical, practical, that you can see and relate to. So I have this model which says, I'm going to get rid of 35 forwarders around the world and put in one guy. I need a model. Okay? If I just have it in my head, I'm not able to see anything and I'm not able to convince anyone, nobody knows. So if it's in your head and I talk to you, you may be thinking about A, I'm thinking about B. But if I am able to put it on a sheet of paper to say, this is exactly what my model is, how it's going to work, then we are calibrated, then we are aligned. So 3 months into the strategy, take back the sheet of paper, you know what the model says. So you don't go out of line, you don't keep on regurgitating whatever it is that you want to do. Okay? So just translating abstract into physical is model. And then you do a simulation. Okay? The simulation is you're using computers or whatever it is, you are trying to forecast or predict how things are going to look like. My personal take is any simulation needs to be stimulating. Stimulating not in a sexual sense, but stimulating in the sense of forcing you to ask questions. So that simulation should raise questions for you, should make you curious enough to ask questions so that you take it to the next level. That's what stimulating simulation is. If it just gives you very blank, bland numbers, it's not good. You have to input that content for it to make it stimulating. To say, this is what, it's all about what if. What if this, what if that? That's what a simulation is ultimately. So, okay, there's going to be some mapping and predictive examples that Natalie is going to share. This is something that she put together. Okay. So she was, like I said, she was working in the service industry. So she was a forwarder. And she was one of my service providers. And then I found that in my company, we never had anyone from this service provider industry working in logistics, right? It was all homegrown, or people have always been a shipper, never been a service provider. So we said, we need to hire a service provider so that we know how a service provider thinks. Okay? We deal with forwarders. How does a forwarder think? What are their cards up their sleeve that they normally have? What are the nuances that these guys do? Now, I need an inside man or an inside woman, right? So we focused on her, and since they did some of the PTT work, we got to know her and how she works and everything else. We were very impressed, and we said, okay, we'll hire her. So we hired her, right? And then she put together this entire predictive modeling for the solar business. Okay? So put your hands together for Natalie once you go through this.
Thank you. Right, so this is something that I've done for the past 2 years with Sun Edison. And basically, like what AD has shared, right? Solar in Sun Edison world, it's fairly, I would say, kind of like a toddler stage, right? And there's a lot of things that's in terms of processes, in terms of mapping, in terms of seeing things on the bigger picture, it's still an infancy stage at that point in time. So this is something that I put out after being with the company, and it works very well. I think the CEO loves it, and they use it like every week during their meeting. So I'm going to share with you on mapping, and I'm not sure how many of you have learned about the concept of predictive modeling. Do you know what predictive modeling means?
See we don't.
Okay, so this is something that I actually put out. If you look at, it's relatively small, but in Sun Edison world, especially when it's solar, we do a lot of, we actually cover the whole entire supply chain. We manufacture, to manufacture modules, right? It basically starts from polysilicon stage all the way through to your ingots, to your cells, to your wafers, wafer cells, and then your modules piece, okay? And apart from that, that's only the modules piece, and we handle everything. So we have a lot of factories actually. If you look at all the color dots here, these are all the factories, and look, there are some that we actually manufacture. We own the factories ourselves. There are some that we actually OEM or we buy them from suppliers. Okay. Apart from modules, we do have trackers. You know, if you look at the solar farm and, for example, KLIA, if you go towards LCCT, that's about approximately about 10 megawatts. On the way to LCCT, if you look on your left-hand side, that's a huge solar farm there. Okay, and sometimes if you go during the noon time, you'll see all the modules lie flat, right? And towards morning, probably till here, and those are tracker systems. Okay, it basically helps you to track the sun. Now, if you go to on the way to KLIA itself, the rooftops in the satellite building, or even the canopy car park, those are all filled still. Okay, so trackers, we do have a lot of tracker supplies from everywhere else as well, and approximately, I think we probably have close to about 2,000 SKUs to deal with, right, every day in terms of all the movements to the project site. So what I just simply put out an illustration here is assuming if I have suppliers one, which is this dot in purple, suppliers dot in yellow, number 2, and so on and so forth, and this in black triangle are all my project sites. Now, assuming if I have all the suppliers, right, from everywhere else in the world, and I need to ship to the project site, how would I map this? How do I want this to move? Well, one reason you want to map this because you want to look at your total landed cost, right? Your price, your unit price versus your logistics cost versus whatever risk that you're taking versus whatever constraints that you might foresee, right? To move all the shipment everywhere else in the world. So you're probably looking at a lot of lines going back and forth up there, right? So how do you determine or predict the best possible case?
You say the full number of all
It's about 2,000 over SKUs. So how do you predict this? How do you see this on a higher level? If you are at the management level, how do I save this, or how do I make this simpler? Okay. So what we did with this is, once we have, it's a lot of data to collect. I spent like months to collect data from planning team, from procurement team, from logistics team, everywhere in the world. We have, 1,000 entities actually. So imagine 1,000 sites that's going to flush your data, and then you have to, do analytics to look into that, and that's how we came up with this in a simpler way. And what happens was, when you do this, right, you need to find, you definitely have a lot of lines everywhere. Like when you go to the app, like, right, when you look at the app menu, and you look at the networks, like flying here everywhere. So it's the same thing, same concept. But how do you determine your best case scenario? Based on the data you have, right, your total landed cost versus the time, because every single project generally lasts about 3 to 6 months, and that's it. And there's a crucial period because you have to go by your timeline. It's very strict timeline because the moment the foundation is ready, you need to start putting in your posts, you need to start getting in your materials in and start putting out, right? The main thing about solar farm is, at the end of the day, is one thing, cash drawdown, because you have a lot of financing with the banks, okay? So time is essence, right? And at the moment the materials arrive on site, or the moment, it all depends on how you negotiate with the bank. So it could be the cash drawdown, the first cash drawdown, let's say 20 million from the bank, it's when the materials arrive on site, right? And that's when you have to rush everything, and you have to look at all the constraints from all the different suppliers for your factories. So let's say, for example, these are some of the examples of the lines that you might probably see. right? And assuming if I have a project in Chile, how do I source my materials? If you look at, sourcing from this side, here in the States to, this is the Colloquium example, and that's our ingot plant in Korea, right? So we supply poly to the ingot manufacturer in Korea. From the ingot manufacturer, we actually supply the ingot to Kuching, that's another plant to manufacture all solar wafers. And once we have the wafers all done out, we ship it to the cell manufacturers in Taiwan. And then we ship it to Flex in Juarez, Mexico. And from Flex Juarez, and then we ship it to Chile. So different projects have different deals, I would say, in terms of where the modules would be. And a lot of times when you look at why do we have to ship all the way here, from Taiwan or whatsoever, and it all depends on also the complexity of the country's regulation, right? If you talk about modules, any modules that ship into US, for example, you can, if you want to ship a module from China, your tax will probably be like about 70%, ADD and CVD tax. So it's double whatever your amount, or triple or whatever your amount. So it doesn't make sense that way. So when you do a predictive model, you'll be able to see what's my best case scenario in terms of total method cost. You might have option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we did was we did it into a system, a predictive tool, where we build the business case and the script in it, and it automatically calculates all your options and what's the best case. Okay. Well, and the most interesting part is 90% of this doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, yes, it's good to have all these things, but in our world, we're so dynamic, 90% of it is like flushed down, right? Why? Because like I said earlier, projects all is about financing, right? Sometimes you might have delayed financing for whatever reason, right? For example, like what Adi said about South Africa, we had a very strict timeline to complete the project, right? We have all the materials there. Now, the thing here is, one of that day, when we were there, they found a viper, viper snake. And because of the rules in South Africa, everybody has to stop their work for 2 weeks just to find the snake. 2 weeks, we have to stop everything. And you have your resources, you pay your EPC to do all their job and everything, but you cannot do anything for 2 weeks. And they found it. And what happens? They found it and throw it back to the forest the next week. Yeah. And that's it. And then start back work again. But it's crazy. And so that 2 weeks, have a lot of penalty and time, people running up and down, trying to find the snake and all that stuff. I mean, there are other more funny stories. Once you talk to us more, you hear all the funny stories. But those are the things that probably would have delayed, right? So once you delayed the financing here, everything got impacted, right? Another thing would be capacity constraints, right? Suppliers or factories wouldn't be able to cope up because your project suddenly you said, hey, I need 2,000 containers by next week. I need it to be on board because I need a cash drawdown that time, 15 million cash drawdown if all my containers go on board on that day and everything on my BL is strong, right? And factories wouldn't be able to cope with capacity, right? You talked about supplier strategy earlier. Well, site not ready, that's a very common case in our world. Every time it says, hey, I need to start producing this and all that stuff, inventory and everything, but site's not ready. Hey, don't ship, it's not ready. And then suddenly you have you suddenly realize that you incurred like 2 million D&Ds, tension and damage for nothing because you can't ship from here to here, right? Compliance and government policy. Different countries have different government policies. share with you another funny incident in Japan, right? We have a project in Japan, which is south of Japan itself. And in Japan, right, that particular project site, right, it's very near to the chicken farm, okay? And Japan is very, very particular about bird flu. And for the materials to go into the project site, it's only one way in, one way out, right? And it's because of the law in Japan and because of the bird flu thing, all the containers must not have Chinese word at all. And to go through that route, right, because you pass the chicken farm, to go through that route, you basically have to sanitize the truck, your containers, your drivers, everything, before you go in. Unload all the containers and the materials inside, comes back at this place where we have to sanitize everything again, right, and goes through. Now, the moment if they see it's not sanitized for whatever reason, right, quality, or you have Chinese word on your container, you'll get a big, huge penalty. Right? It's like, oh, chicken farm, you know? Yeah, that's the largest chicken farm, and that's the thing that we have to always look into as well as part of the policies driven, right? And we have to make sure that the process to get it there. So it's not as fairly simple as just doing predictive model, right? But in actual fact, on a tactical basis, you get to see all these things, and you have to start to look at how you want to tweak it, the process. Well, yeah, cost constraints. Yeah, sometimes you might want to companies, especially when you do business, you might want to delay paying your supplier because their parties is paying another supplier or things like that. So cash constraints is one thing for them. Quality issues. We do have a lot of quality issues also, right? Like what Edie explained, when you talk about wafer, even a hairline, you cannot use it at all. So when you talk about cells, and cells we have to ship every, all of them. And the moment you have some quality defect in your cells, you can't build your modules, right? Okay, I talk about ADD and CVD impact. Okay, so predictive modeling to me it's my passion, and I get to see all the different things, and you get to see things from a bigger perspective, from a higher level perspective. Okay, and that's with data, it actually allows you to be able to make an informed decision or take some calculated risks. Right? Talk about it. Okay, any questions for me?
Yeah, before we let you go, actually, your big data analytics, is it real time?
It's real. I will show you all my other stuff. It's like probably 60 or 1,000 data. Sure.
What are you using? What kind of tools are you using for your big data analytics? HANA or something else?
Well, we actually use supply chain group. Yeah, to do this. But so it all depends, right? When you talk about the big data like this, when I started out, I used macros and pivots and all that stuff and trying to put this in manual, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so manual, and I have to do this and feed all this information back to the board like every week, and it's no joke. It's good. So what we've done is we work with a team of people that comes out with this predictive model, so that it fits the moment it fits the data, it all comes out.
Please don't take it as offense, but this is 10% success rate. Is that low for all these efforts? Because you said in 90% of the cases.
Well, okay, so maybe okay. 10% will say most of the time this doesn't work. It's because of logistics, or for whatever reasons that the considerations that you have, the factors. But it may work for the planning team. It may work for the procurement team because you have all your data in it. So it all covers, basically this data covers all the planning, team and procurement team and logistics all combined together. Yes. Yeah. So we do have. So what we did was we do have like inventory. So we have to look at buffer stocks, how do you replace inventory, which are best basically inventory, maybe do some like hub, BMI model and stuff like that. We do consolidation as well. So we have like for example in Korea we have about 5 suppliers. So what they do is we negotiate the deal. Let's say, hey, why don't you deliver it to the warehouse because it's all loose items, especially the trackers. So then you consolidate in the warehouse and then ship it as SDL and move it out. It's cheaper that way, right? And it saves time. Thank you.
So it was an interesting question. It says, if you do this, you spend so much of effort, you put everything together, and 90% of the time you're throwing it down the drain. So why the hell are you even doing it? This is almost, the analogy to this is you're going to see a doctor, and the doctor says, I need to give you a brain scan, an MRI, an ultrasound, a urine test, a stool test, and a blood test. And you go through all of this, and he finally says, actually, this was only a toothache. So why did he have to do all of this? Is to give you enough information to be able to appreciate what you can expect if you do A, if you do B, if you do C. But logistics being so dynamic. So think about it from a time scale perspective. A project is awarded, say for solar, project is awarded. You're going to start working on financing. Because each project, you probably spend about $5 million per acre. And some of these are huge in terms of acreage, right? So you work financing. So that's happening in parallel. You're working with suppliers to say, 2, 3 different suppliers to say, I may be giving you this, get ready. I'm trying to pull together an EPC or engineering procurement construction team to do the actual installation implementation piece. I got to work with some forwarders who are going to move this forward. I'm working all of this in parallel with some basic assumptions. So I'm putting together a model to say, hey, if we do this, if it comes from here, if everything works clockwork, your cost is 20 cents per watt. One small little piece changes from there, and you're gone. So this helps you say, this is my ideal case, my best case scenario, which will never happen. So all you're trying to do is measure your actual performance against this when you actually execute. Finally to say, okay, I've got a 3 cents per watt delta, and this is what actually happened. This is what we need to watch out for the next time. That's the value that you have. It is almost like saying, I'm going to sub-optimize. This is my optimized, best case, ideal utopia, okay, which will never ever happen. I'm going to sub-optimize because that's what the reality is. That is your value of predictive model when you do that model. When we went out with our strategy of consolidating 35 into one forwarder, we had a model. Did we achieve 100% of that model? I says no, we did not. But we achieved a very good 90%. What we thought we were going to achieve, we achieved. The 10% was just very little changes. that brings an end to this. Is there any other questions or anything that you would like to ask? Share with this. This is just sharing some of the experiences that we've had, real life examples that we have seen over the years in the company that we have worked in. There's no right or wrong. Okay, was it right to consolidate? It's anybody's guess. Should you have had one? Should you have started with 2 or 3? Anybody's guess. Any model works. As long as it works and you're able to get a very good consequential result, for the most part, it means it was the right decision. If you switched from 35 to 1 and you had a major collapse and you had to go back to 25 different guys, then it tells you your model was wrong. That's how you evaluate it. There's no right or wrong in logistics. As long as you achieve your end result with, the biggest driver is cost. Right? There's only 2 departments in any company which spends a hell of a lot of money. The first one is procurement, because they issue a PO for every single thing, whether it's papers and pencil or cakes and refreshment. They issue the PO. The next biggest guy is logistics. So when you spend a lot of money, the first thing that the company wants to know is, are you going to spend less next year? How are you going to spend less? My volume is going to go up. So can you imagine, we started in 2009 when we did this exercise, we were running at $30 million, okay, just for the semiconductor business. Today I'm shipping more than that, and I'm spending half of it. Okay? And that's a whole series of different initiatives that you put in every year. And let me tell you, if you have 5 ideas how to reduce cost, just implement 2. Because next year you need the other 2. You can't come up with 5 every year. There's no way. And management, this is playing it smart. Right? So you have a whole bunch of initiatives and you say, I'm going to release 1. I'm going to release 2. Right? That's what you do, and you keep it. Keep it for the following years. It's just saving it for a rainy day. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just being smart. How you do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in the same job for the last 10 years. Okay, any comments, questions, feedback?
Just a quick question is when you are talking about these costs, they are US currency, right?
Yes.
Are they US currency when you say 5 million and all that?
Yes. I'm so used to, because we are a US based company, so every time we talk dollars, and we always mean US dollars. It's getting to be a bit pathetic to talk about ringgit nowadays.
So the ringgit cost just went up then?
That's another interesting point about foreign exchange. Right? So it used to be at 2.5, went up to 3 point something, now you're talking about 4. Right? So when the local entities in Malaysia report spend in US dollars, it's spending less. Okay? But that's where you have to account for forex gains or losses. If it is just a very marginal fluctuation, nobody bothers, but this is significant, right? This is really huge change. So you can't take credit for something of that nature. Right? So you show it as a savings. Yes, I have a forex savings, but hey, this is still forex, not your initiative. It's just like how when the fuel oil prices came down, the fuel surcharge came down. Okay? So suddenly your air freight expenditure comes down significantly. You didn't reduce rates, you just reduced the FSC. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for sharing. It's really hard to find people to share the real experience. Since I come from the industry as well, I was really enjoying it. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad for sharing this out. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for patiently listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bang, for the amazing and really useful
really enjoyed, and we had a very good time with you. Both of you, you're very excellent in those experience, those information, those knowledge you share with our students. We already enjoyed, and I hope it can be very useful for those they want to establish the company or the business later on. And just as appreciate you your time, and we provided a very small souvenir for you. I would like to invite Mr. Dr. Harvey also to join me. And on behalf of all of us, to help me to deliver this small souvenir to both of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ms. Natalie also, you really enjoyed the speech? Anyway, thank you very much, all of you, for your being here, your time, your spirit, support us, to support this event. I appreciate your kind support. And to just share with you the agenda that we have in the afternoon, for those that are really interested about our next industry talk, also, I would like to use this opportunity to invite you to join us. In the afternoon session, we will start with 2 presentations from our students. My friend, Mr. Andras, is the first presenter, and Mr. Aslo Zaman from IT department, the second. And we are going to host Professor Dr. Sureswaran, and he's also a very successful professor in Malaysia, and he's coming from Penang, and we will host him. And after that, we will have 3 more presentations in the afternoon to wrap up today's session. Please also take your time. There is a very slight refreshment provided. You can also enjoy the refreshment. Thank you very much, and see you in the afternoon, 1 p.m.